What's going on, guys? Still here. Today we're going to be talking about the relationship between fixed wing close air support and SPAAGs, commonly known as SPAGs. And I did say in the previous video I was kind of done talking about this, but that was kind of in relation to helicopters. But today we're going to be talking about fixed wings instead, simply because I'm sure all of you are familiar with currently the summer sale has allowed a lot of people to buy premium aircraft and kind of play around the battle rating of 8.3 to 9.7, especially with the current meme of the term spam coming back. Now today we have a couple of graphs and spreadsheets made by my good friend Aerobane, who has kind of been helping me put this video together by compiling a lot of battle rating data and weapons data. And of course, towards the end of the video, we will be getting into some of the solutions that we have proposed to kind of solve the issue between the battle ratings of 8.3 to 9.7. But without further ado, let's get right into the video. So the issue is that War Thunder's close air support aircraft progress pretty steadily as battle rating goes up, getting more and more powerful as the battle rating goes up. This works okay at low to mid tiers because both sides, the SBA and the CAS, stay pretty similar. Dumb bombs and rockets versus unassisted guns, such as pretty much how World War II functions. However, at about 7.7 and up, things start to change. From here on out, as battle rating increases, the weapon being used change. As the close air support weapons evolve, so do the SBAA. From 7.7 to 8.3, there are CAS jets that do roughly 1,000 kilometers an hour and carry dumb bombs and rockets. Then at 8.7 and 9.3, the typical CAS jet does a little bit over that, and the weapons shift to air-to-ground missiles and CCIP-assisted rocket and bombs. At 9.7 plus, they're almost exclusively supersonics, where a lot of weapons are guided, CCIP, or even fire and forget, such as the Maverick. At 8.0 and 8.3, there are ballistic SPAGs with radar or IRST assistance, such as the SIDEM and the VADS, which do a good job of countering 7.7 to 8.3 close air support. At 9.7 plus, there are SACLOS or beam riding SAMs, such as the Tunguska and ADATs, which do a very good job at countering a lot of the supersonic aircraft. However, around 8.7 to 9.3, there's almost no SPAA without up-tiering existing ones from 8.0 to 8.7. And there are not really any new tools or weapons for them to use against 8.7 to 9.3 aircraft. While close air support keeps getting better, air defense is kind of getting the short end of the stick. And this can be seen in a chart that Aero made showing the distribution of SPAA in relation to battle rating. As you can see, for World War II, the most part it's filled in. However, there is a big gap between 5.7 and 6.3 where there are no SPAA. However, because of how World War II aircraft and SPAAs function in relation to each other, you can bring lower tier existing SPAAs up in battle rating. However, once we get to around 7.0 type up tiers and pretty much 7.7 plus, you can see that Aero made a couple of brackets to where there are close air support that primarily focus on rockets and bombs, and close air support that focuses on AGMs and CCIP, seeing where the radar SPAGs are and where the mouse-guided SAMs are. As you can kind of tell, there is a big gap between 8.3 to 8.7, and of course it's like one big battle rating range where there can be up tiers, there can be down tiers, of where every game is very, very different. Whether you might have an A4 one game with rockets and bombs and another game with bullpups. But overall, the general idea is that a lot of air-to-ground missile ordinances on things like the G91 and A4 are overlapping with radar SPAGs that really can't outrange them. Now, the one SAM that actually does see the 8.7 area, and we'll see a lot of A4s and G91s, is the German Roland system, which is 9.7, and after the multiple buffs to the Roland weapon system, this has become a very potent SAM, and at this point should probably be up tier to 10.0, possibly even 10.3. Now, this next chart shows aircraft of the certain battle rating brackets, so 7.7 to 8.3 and 8.7 to 9.3 shows you the aircrafts that are the most common for ground attack and ground RB, and then on the right side we have the typical weapons for those respective battle ratings. So as you can see, 7.7 to 8.3, we have aircraft like the F-84, the B-57, G-91, MiG-15s, IL-28s, Meteors, Canberras, the SAB-105s, and the Sea Vixen. And on the right side, we have 8.7 and 9.3 with the A4s, the G91s, the usual air-to-ground missile-carrying bunch, with a couple of outliers, of course, that don't have them, like the A32 and the Q5 early. Now, for the typical weapons of 7.7 to A3 aircraft, we have unguided bombs, HVARs, FFARs, the different types of Swedish rockets, the Snebs and the S5Ks, all which take, in terms of the rockets at least, a number of hits to actually destroy a tank. Versus 8.7 and 9.3, where we have the Bullpups, the Nords, the Kh-66s, CCIP guided Zunis and S-24s on things like the Harrier and the Su-7. So you can kind of see, in a very, very tiny battle rating area, there is quite a huge jump in the technology of the ordnance involved. The two outliers here being the Sea Vixen and the SAB 105 OE, because they have guided munitions, but they are 8.3. Essentially, this is forcing players to use outdated SPAGs against long-range guided munitions at a battle rating where it just simply, they get outranged. Now, because Gaijin added things like the ADATs and the Tunguska first, they've essentially skipped over an entire generation of surface-to-air missiles that were mostly IR-guided, such as the MIM-72 Chaparral, the Strela system, which is featured on multiple vehicles, such as the MTLB chassis, which we've already seen on the Sturm S, and also the BRDM chassis. Now, before we move on to more IR-guided SAMs, I want to explain the dynamic really quickly between CAS and SPAGs. Now, this problem propagates down the line. 9.7 and 10.0 CAS, such as the A7, are even more powerful and be absolutely insane against 8.3 ballistic SPAGs. So to prevent the problem, essentially, Gaijin is forced to down-tier their better SACLOS and beam riding SAMs in order to extend coverage to the lower battle ratings as much as possible. This results in shitty leapfrog balancing. At 8.0 and 8.3, SPAA are dominant. At 9.0, CAS is dominant. At 10.0 and 10.3, SAMs are totally dominant. And at 11.0, things are a little bit better because of the aircraft that are at 10.7 and 11.0. This is not the only problem though. Maps screw over SPAA and promote static gameplay. Small maps mean SPAA cannot leave their spawn in some cases, and even get cross-mapped in some of them. This discourages people to spawn them and traps them in one location that CAS planes know, only further increasing the effectiveness of close air support if, of course, nobody is spawning in one. This makes them easier targets, and it's a problem that is compounded around 9.0 when CAS outranges them. On larger maps like Red Desert, SPAA can freely leave their spawn and have several square kilometers to hide in position. This means they are more capable of ambushing planes. On a small map, they can't really leave spawn without either getting directly into combat or exposing themselves. At the same time, on a small map, they can cover the entire battlefield from their spawn. This is even worse with SAMs, considering that some air spawns are so close to the battlefield you have very, very little time to react before getting spawn camped. So small maps essentially are just encouraging static play, and very, very frustrating gameplay for both SPAA and planes between 8.0 and 9.7, while large maps enable interesting games of cat and mouse. So how do we address the CAS versus SPAA dynamic above 8.0? Essentially what we need to do is move powerful AGM platforms like the A4E and the G91s to 9.0, possibly 9.3. I know a lot of people don't like that idea for AirRB, but these aircraft are ground attack aircraft. They are fighters second. In AirRB, of course, the A4 has an air spawn, and you know how that turns out. But these aircraft really should be balanced for ground RB. I've always been a proponent of saying that ground attack aircraft should have different battle ratings for ground RB versus air RB. Move SAMs like the Tunguska and the ADATs up to 11.0, considering that is how good they are. That's where they need to be. They don't need to be any lower. They do not need to be ruining 9.7 games now that SAMs of the IR capability would be in the lower battle rating brackets. SAMs like, as I said earlier, the Chaparral and the Strela 10 system. Also, don't forget SAMs like the Type 11 Tansam short arrow, essentially. Don't forget that Gaijin has totally destroyed Mistral performance, and something like the side of Mistral would actually be fine as a 9.7 SAM. I know many people might not like that idea, but if you've seen how Mistrals perform, that thing is nowhere near a 10.0 or 10.3 SAM. I want to go back to the Chaparral for a minute. The The MIM-72C Chaparral essentially has an AIM-9D with an all-aspect seeker head, so roughly 16.5 Gs in all aspect. These are a perfect counter for 9.0 cast because they pose a significant threat without guaranteeing a death sentence. Because if you can see the missile launch on IRs, similar to how they work in aircraft, especially from the ground where it's a little bit more static and you can kind of anticipate where it's coming from, I think as long as you're smart, you will actually be able to dodge them with reasonable chance. But of course, it will be punishing players who just spawn, fly straight, and do nothing. Some aircraft like the A4 having countermeasures would, again, make this easier. Now, I don't know too much about the Strela, but I figure it would be a pretty good AA, especially if you could take it on something low profile like the Sturm or the BRDM, which is a little bit more mobile. You could essentially just be a very, very sneaky AA and kind of work in tandem with anyone that spawns a gun-placed SPAA. Because again, the issue that we're trying to solve here is the fact that guided munitions are either too good because they outrange the SPAGs, or essentially not good enough if you're too high of a battle rating and you've got something like a Roland watching your spawn point. Another option that I like the idea of is having something like the Gepard carry Stinger missiles as a modification that you unlock. Also, that would essentially mean that the Gepard should go up to 8.7. Only because people use it in a tank hunter role is it still 8.0, while the Sergeant York, which is essentially only really used in an anti-air mode, is 8.7. So I think that that's an option that a lot of vehicles could have if they could carry surface-to-air missile ordnance in terms of like an upgrade. Then making them like a tier 3 or 4 modification would be a really good idea, and this would definitely solve the issue that the Gepard has. I believe that the Shilka could actually have Iglas or Strelas mounted to it. Now, the one last thing that would help alleviate a bit of this issue, and I know some people are going to disagree with me on this, depending on how you play War Thunder, but improving the high tier map rotation to allow for a better CAS/SPAG cat and mouse dynamic, in which SPAAs are not trapped in spawn, and one SPAA can't really cover the entire map without even moving. I very much enjoy maps like Big Mozdok, Fulda, Red Desert, etc. Those kind of maps like Kursk and FireArk. I think that SPAA and just overall the game flows better on those maps, but the one proponent missing between 8.7 to 9.7 is having IR SAMs. So CAS aircraft on wide open maps, like you can see in the background on Fields of Poland, where there's no real cover for vehicles to hide behind except in the buildings or aircraft to use low terrain. Essentially, you can just dominate from a really high altitude with no counter. And that's the one thing that IR SAMs would be able to prevent, is G91s and A4s climbing straight up, diving straight down, and bullpupping SPAGs or Nording SPAGs before that they can even really essentially open fire. But anyways, guys, that's pretty much it from me for today. If you have any other IR SAM ideas, I would like to hear them in the comment section down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Steel Wolf, and I'll see you guys next time.